Championship is brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. In association with Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.
It's a glorious morning here at Silverstone. Hello, welcome from John Watson and Allard Cow for this half-hour warm-up for this afternoon's British Grand Prix. And after all the rain on Friday, John, a little rain on Saturday afternoon, there is suddenly a lot of sunshine on Sunday morning.
Thank you, Allard. And yes, we are certainly seeing a lot more blue here at Silverstone than we have seen over the past 2 days. And the prospects for a dry race are looking very, very strong indeed. And this is the last opportunity for some teams anyway. They will have to find out what their car will be like on full tanks. Of course, on Friday we had rain all day. Saturday, some teams who have been here testing prior to the Grand Prix have done their full tank running, they've done race distance. But for the non-British based teams, those teams like Ferrari, Ligier, Larousse, Minardi, the BMS Lola Ferrari team, they have got a distinct disadvantage. And I think Ferrari and a few other teams were expressing displeasure at the regulations which exist currently in Formula One, which restrict team testing only to those circuits where your home country or your home base is placed.
Well, here's the man who missed pole position by 1300ths of a second. Damon Hill will start on the front row alongside teammate Alain Prost, who snatched pole position away during the very last minute of qualifying, and at 1:19.006 is very close to that magnificent pole position time from Nigel Mansell last year, which no one thought was going to be, well, close.
I think that it was considered to be pretty much unattainable, but I think it was more the manner in which Alain Prost and Damon Hill attained their times in qualifying yesterday. I mean, it was very, very exciting indeed. And in fact, in the about 3 minutes or probably 2 minutes before the end of that session, Damon Hill held that provisional pole. He then was visited by Murray Walker from BBC, and they were talking via the radio. And Damon's comment afterwards was, "Well, I was visited by the kiss of Murray Walker," said Damon. "He came over the radio to tell me I was in pole position, only to come back a few seconds later and, well, here's the bad news, Damon. Alain Prost has just taken your pole position away." But it was a great afternoon of qualification and certainly an ideal platform for this afternoon's British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
Well, most drivers going out and coming straight back into the pits on the Grand Prix, where hopefully it's going to be a capacity crowd, John, but it seems it's not as busy as last year for some reason.
Well, I think the Mansell factor, of course, is such a big part of Grand Prix racing, not just here at Silverstone, but throughout the world. And crowd figures have been down on what we saw in 1992. And Mansell, as a man, was such a charismatic performer as well as a personality. But Damon Hill is the man who is driving his car, and well, his teammate Alain Prost is running from his race car into a spare car or the other way around, because, of course, on Sunday morning it's the only opportunity a driver and team have to run back-to-back spare car or race car.
One of those cars from Alain Prost fitted with the ABS system, the other one isn't. And actually that's the car he raced in Magny-Cours, which was his spare car. And after the race he said, "Oh, actually I think this chassis is a little better than my race car."
It's an interesting and probably unusual comment, because in reality the way Grand Prix cars are constructed these days, they're made so accurately. There's really little difference between one chassis and another, and it ultimately comes down to that factor which for a driver like Alain Prost is very, very important indeed, and that is just simply feel. It's the reaction he gets through the seat of his pants, through his hands and through his feet, that tell him that this car is more comfortable. It allows me to do more with it. I can lean on it harder. In reality, if Prost had time to jump backwards and forwards between the two cars, I'm sure he could dial out any differences between the two. That's how small, for example, a ride height or a small aerodynamic adjustment can be.
Well, we're watching Gerhard Berger on the circuit, and Ferrari is not having a happy time here at the moment. the Ferraris who qualified way down. Even Jean Alesi, who's usually up there, is now down in 12th position. And teammate Gerhard Berger is in 13th position. So both Ferraris out of the top 10.
Well, Alan, really, that's just what I was talking about with pre-race testing. Ferrari, of course, did not have the right to be here for the extensive pre-race testing that took place 2 weeks ago. And that's partly why you're seeing two Williams in the front, a Benetton and a McLaren in the top 6. In fact, the most noticeable performance in qualifying of those teams that did not get to test at Silverstone was Martin Brundle in his Ligier Renault.
Talking about testing, John, we have Benetton test driver Alan McNish with us in the booth this morning, and also BRDC president Ines Ireland, and two Scotsmen.
Yes, indeed, we've got two Scotsmen. And you've got a Scotsman with an Irish name who lives in England, and you've got a Scotsman, Alan McNish, who of course is the test driver for the Benetton Ford team. But in fact, we talked to Ines Ireland first of all. Ines, you raced in Grand Prix racing for many years. You can tell us how long ago it was. But in fact, you did something quite unique. You raced for Ferrari here at Silverstone in the early 60s.
Yes, it was in 1962, and it was a very unusual occurrence, and apparently the only time Enzo Ferrari ever gave a works car to somebody who was not a contracted works driver. And the regular drivers for Ferrari were upset, to say the least, that I was zooming around at Silverstone and they weren't. It was a magnificent experience for me. It was one of the shark-nosed Ferraris, and I don't believe any of them exist today. I think they were all destroyed, not by the drivers, but by Enzo Ferrari himself.
Well, do you ever regret maybe never having the opportunity to drive as a full-time driver in the Ferrari team? Because I think most drivers at some time in their career would love that opportunity.
Yes, indeed. I think it was an ambition of everybody, probably an ambition of yours, to drive for Ferrari. And of course, I did drive quite a lot of Ferraris in sports cars, sports and GT, and in several occasions Enzo Ferrari sent works cars abroad for me to drive there.
Well, looking at the contemporary Grand Prix car, this is the latest offering from Ferrari. I mean, the changes are enormous. Do you agree with the kind of developments and technology that we now have in Formula One, or would you rather see cars that were maybe closer to those 1.5-litre Grand Prix cars of some 25, 30 years ago?
No, not the 1.5-litre Formula. They were dreadfully, they were dull and boring, and they really didn't have any power. And, even by the end of the Formula, I don't suppose they had 200 horsepower. But I don't like all this suspension business now and the traction control. It is doing away with so much of the sensitivity of the racing driver himself.
Well, Gerhard Berger is the fastest man on the circuit at the moment, and that is because he's the only one who's completed a couple of flying laps. So it's very early in the session. We have had about 7 minutes, and it's going to take a short break here on Eurosport, and after that we'll be back from Silverstone.
Nobody learns more about making winning Formula One tires than Goodyear. That learning continuously changes the way we design the tires you drive. All Goodyear Eagle high-performance tires rely on our Formula One technology to give better performance, more stability, more traction wherever life takes you. We design tires for the world's most demanding drivers. Goodyear, a change for the better.
The Ford Escort has won again at the Acropolis Rally. The Ford Escort. We race. You get the result.
Welcome back here on Eurosport, and Ayrton Senna has lost a bit of his bodywork, but
it's the access panel on the top of where the spring damper units are mounted on the top of the chassis, and we've seen that happen. In fact, last weekend on one of the footworks, it popped off as well, and in fact it looks more than just the access panel, because some of the cabling that is responsible for that ride height control mechanism working also appears to have become detached. So Ayrton Senna is going to make it back to the pits very slowly indeed, and there is the offending panel lying somewhere around the circuit in the grass. It would have been blown up very high into the air. Probably if that came off on Hanger Straight, it's well, you can see it there's about 20 feet in from the side of the track, while teammate Michael Andretti pounds away coming up into Ferrari corner. And over the past couple of weekends we've seen the confidence that Michael Andretti has lacked, and also the commitment beginning to re-emerge, and it's been a very awfully difficult season so far for Michael Andretti. And there now Ayrton Senna making his way back into the pits.
Well, Damon Hill is the fastest driver so far here at the circuit. He's done 4 laps, and that's more than anyone else. Alan, you've been a test driver for both the McLaren and the Benetton team. Are there any distinct differences between those two?
I think probably the major difference between McLaren and Benetton is that McLaren have won World Championships before, and they know how to do it, and they go through the same process every year trying to win the World Championship. With Benetton, because they haven't done it yet, they are very, very youthful in their enthusiasm, and they work tremendously hard in an enthusiastic way to do it, whereas McLaren is very regimented in its way.
Well, you're not racing at the moment. Would you prefer, if you had a choice, would you prefer being a test driver above being, let's say, doing a full season of Formula 3000?
Yes, at the moment, after racing 3 seasons in 2000, I looked at the possibilities for 1993 and decided that a year of testing with a top Formula 1 team like Benetton is a better way to go, purely and simply on the performance of Damon Hill in the Williams before, and how it's attained a full Formula 1 drive for him. Also, Mark Blundell and Alessandro Zanardi have done the same thing and got rides in F1.
Well, we're watching Alan Prost. He's just found a way around Mark Blundell, of course, both with V10 RS5 Renault power. And Alan Prost showing again the kind of performances we've seen from him over previous seasons. He had a shaky start in many respects to this season. Again, confidence and commitment was initially not quite there, but after the Canadian Grand Prix, it had all come back to Alan Prost, and then in Manicure, a masterful performance. And then, in fact, on Friday, I think one of the best performances I've seen in the rain. Alan Prost dispelled all those rumours and myths about his wet weather ability. He did a superb job. And then finally, in those closing moments, seconds, in fact, of qualification, he took away pole position from the people's hero here this weekend, Damon Hill. But in this, you raced alongside Damon's father, Graham Hill. Now, do you have any emotions now watching Graham's offspring here on the front row of a grid for the British Grand Prix? And really, he has to be a very strong potential Grand Prix winner this afternoon.
Oh, I think so. It's just a matter of time before Damon does win a Grand Prix. And you know, hopefully he's going to do it here at Silverstone. It's a race, it's one of the Grand Prix his father didn't manage to win. No, I don't get any particular emotions watching Damon, other than knowing how proud Graham would have been of him. And so if that's an emotion, I suppose. But you know, I'm delighted for Damon, because he's worked hard and long, and he's finally really fallen on his feet. He's in one of the best 2 cars on the Formula 1 grids these days, and he's doing it justice. He's doing an exceptionally good job for his team.
Alain Prost is the fastest man on the circuit at the moment. Then Damon Hill, Eric Comas, Michael Andretti, John Alesi, and in 6th place, the man we're watching at the moment, Johnny Herbert, who is, well, full of confidence. I mean, he's driving better, I think, John, than he's done for a very long time indeed.
Well, it all came right for Johnny Herbert on Saturday morning, and he explained that as being literally somebody pushed a button on the computer, put in a new program into the active suspension and all the other bits and pieces that are related to that, And all of a sudden, by magic, the car went from being a very difficult and a car that did not provide confidence for Herbert or Zanardi to a car where Herbert and Zanardi were able to literally chuck it around. And we have watched, again, throughout Saturday, at the commitment and confidence that Johnny Herbert has. Now, coming through Beckett's here, very, very fast right-hand corner into Beckett's sequence, then left, then right, and out onto Hanger Straight. During the testing, I was here during that testing 2 weeks ago, and you never quite saw that degree of commitment and confidence that we have seen here. Now, that's the problem with all these high-tech Grand Prix cars. To change it, all you need is a boffin to come up with the right permutation for the computer, and all of a sudden the car works. Now, I have to say I agree a little bit with Innes Ireland on his sentiments that I want to see Grand Prix drivers actually driving their cars. I want to see them coming out of a slow corner and using their foot and not relying on the brain to control wheel spin. Now, Alan McNish, you did a lot of testing with the traction control that now is on the McLaren, and of course the system that Benetton are using, which is more a Cosworth-developed system. It's not a pure traction control device. But what is the actual feeling when you come out of a hairpin bend or a corner like Luffield, for example, plant your foot? What is the feeling you get?
Well, unfortunately, unlike what it used to be without traction control, the feeling is that just the rear of the car is held down and it does not wheel spin, it does not jump out of line, and so therefore I feel it's a driver leveler to have traction control on the cars nowadays.
But do you feel that it takes away from the skill of the individual drivers? Would you prefer to have traction control banned, for example?
I certainly would. I think active, however, is slightly different because it's still extremely hard to drive an active car very fast. But traction control and ABS, I believe, do detract from the driver's ability to take the car around the circuit to maximum mobility.
I certainly think the spectators here this weekend at Silverstone wonder sometimes what's happening. They hear these cars apparently misfiring all around the circuit. And Innes was saying that, you know, outside the BRDC suite, which has got a very tight left-hand corner called Brooklands, and the members in the club are all standing there saying, well, what's wrong with Formula One? All their cars are sounding like they're off a cylinder or they're misfiring. But that's the way traction control works. It actually cuts out a number of the cylinders on the engine, but it sounds awful.
Oh, it certainly sounds awful. It just reduces the power that the engine has at any given time. I had a very good friend of mine and a guest down on Friday, and it was his first time really at a Formula One event. And he just did not understand quite until I explained to him what was happening to the cars. He thought one of the cars was actually breaking down.
Well, Ayrton Senna's back out on the circuit and currently way down in the time so far this morning. In fact, he's so far down, he's 24th, and it's only Rubens Barrichello who's slower, and Barrichello has had one lap out and one lap in, and so the Cecil Jordan team have a problem with their lead driver. But Ayrton Senna will be very, very anxious indeed to see his McLaren working better than it did in qualifying. It's ironic that when this car first, in fact, ran at Silverstone before the South African Grand Prix, the team were able to do a time which they've worked very, very hard indeed over pre-race testing and official practice here to get anywhere close to. And sometimes I wonder, do teams confuse themselves with this level of technology rather than actually getting on with the job of just racing?
Alain Prost has just gone into the pits, but he is the fastest man on the circuit. Easily the fastest man, 2 seconds faster than Michael Schumacher in second. Damon Hill, also in the pits, is in third. Then it's Riccardo Patrese in fourth. Eric Gomez, I think that's a very good performance, John, so far in fifth position.
Again, a team that didn't test here, the more miles they do, the more they will gain from running. Of course, Robin Herd is in charge of the technical side of the Larousse Lamborghini team, and Robin Herd is very familiar with Silverstone, and I'm sure that experience is helping them very much at this point of the Grand Prix.
Well, Gomez just moving up to fourth position now. Michael Andretti is in sixth, Johnny Herbert in seventh, eighth Gerhard Berger, ninth Mark Blundell, and in 10th position Jean Alesi. But let's see what this man Ayrton Senna can do on basically what is his first flying lap on the Silverstone circuit this morning. Alan, actually you've driven on both the old circuit and the new circuit. Which one do you prefer?
It's very funny because I was one of the few drivers that actually enjoyed driving the old circuit, even although it wasn't tremendously demanding. It was easy to be quick there, but it was very, very difficult to be quickest. And I was very lucky in that I think I had a little knack at a couple of corners, specifically club, and I was managed able to extract a little bit more time. The new circuit is very, very demanding in very different ways. As we can see with Senna coming through Bridge Corner, that's probably one of the most awesome corners in the Grand Prix circuit.
Well, certainly in a Grand Prix car, Bridge is just about flat out, and that's 185 miles an hour. And to see that corner as you approach it, over the top of a hill, down the dip under the bridge, and then go right at that speed, it is, I think, the best example of current Grand Prix driver ability, as well as the technology, and the downforce that these current Grand Prix cars produce is very, very high indeed. And in fact, Silverstone is probably the highest grip level of, I mean, in terms of G-forces you're experiencing if you're testing here for a day, for example. At the end of a day, a Grand Prix driver knows he's done his day's work.
Yes, at Silverstone, each corner has a G-force level above 2G. So that's the minimum, and we're pulling up to 3.5G through the Beckett's complex and also through Bridge Bend. And it is very physical. The drivers today are 59 laps, and that will last pretty much upwards to 2 hours, and they'll be very tired at the end of it.
I think all these things are relative. You know, talking about the old circuit, I've never driven on this new circuit, but the old circuit, with the cars we had in those days and the suspension and the little tires, the old Woodcote corner before it got messed about, that was pretty bloody awesome, I can tell you. and even Stowe Corner at the end of Hanger Straight was a very amazing corner.
Alain Prost is the fastest driver on the circuit. Then it's Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill, Eric Comas and Riccardo Patrese. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Eurosport's Breakfast Show.
Als mir die DEKRA-Leute gesagt haben, sie wären der große staatlich anerkannte Prüfdienst, da war ich skeptisch. Als mir die DEKRA-Leute ihre 30.000 Kfz-Prüfstellen vorgestellt haben, da war ich überrascht. Und als mir dann die DEKRA-Leute gezeigt haben, dass sie mein Privatauto genauso gründlich checken, wie ich das bei meinem Rennauto gewohnt bin, da war ich überzeugt. Die DEKRA, geprüft und für gut befunden.
The Ford Electronics Competition, your weekly rendezvous. Look at this. Can you name the driver and Grand Prix circuit? The lucky final draw winner will win a fabulous trip for two to Adelaide, Australia, where they will live through the ultimate 93 Grand Prix in the pits with the stars of the circuit. You can also win an exclusively autographed t-shirt by your favorite drivers. Just answer stating the question number with your complete address on a postcard within the week to Ford Electronics, PO Box 1, Brentford, Essex, England, CM13 3DN. The winner will be announced on Eurosport during the Portuguese Grand Prix the 26th of September. Ford Electronics wishes you good luck.
Eurosport Live.
Welcome back here on Eurosport, the morning warm-up in Silverstone, and we've got John Watson, Ines Ireland, Anna McNeish and Ella Calv here, and it's Eurosport's Breakfast Show. John, this afternoon, the British Grand Prix, a lot of laps. I think it's going to be fairly warm. Do we anticipate pit stops?
Well, I spoke to Goodyear this morning, and they're not entirely sure, partly because the weather conditions have been a lot cooler than they were a fortnight ago when they did the basis of their race preparation. I think that it is possible a lot of teams will try and go through without a pit stop. One of the drawbacks of stopping here at Silverstone is that the pit entry is a very long and it's a convoluted one, and you lose a lot of time on the entry to the pit. The exit isn't so bad. So I think if you can get away without making a pit stop and at the same time not use the tyre too hard in the early part of the race, I'm sure that Alain Prost and Damon Hill are going to try and make it through without pit stops. But for sure there will be a number of people who will just press too hard and will use their tyres up in the very early laps of the race and will have to make the inevitable stop for fresh rubber.
Well, one man who already said he's not going to stop unless he's got a puncture is Christian Fittipaldi yet again.
Well, for teams like Minardi, in many respects, if they can get away with that, it really is to their advantage. And now, Ines Alan just pointing out to us that Derek Warwick has suddenly leapt up into the top 4, and his fourth quickest one, 27.233. And that performance on Saturday afternoon from Derek when he was 8th quickest in qualification. Again, Derek, like many drivers this season, had a very difficult year. They haven't been able to get the footwork Mugen to work satisfactorily until here at Silverstone this weekend. And all of a sudden, both Aguri Suzuki and Derek Warwick are doing a much, much better job than they've done all year.
Well, I spoke to Jackie Oliver yesterday after qualifying. He said, oh, it's all a matter of an old dog can learn new tricks. But, Alan, are they that different to drive? Is a passive car that different to an active car?
It is slightly different to drive, however, saying that all the principles are exactly the same, you still have to push the cars to the ultimate limit. You tend to maybe lose a little bit of feel depending on the system that you're using and the feel that you can get from the car. However, saying that, it's still extremely difficult to drive an active quick, just as difficult as it is to drive a passive quick.
Michael Schumacher in third position at the moment, and a lot of people thought that was the man, the star of qualifying yesterday after having that, well, what he called minor shunt going into Copse, then getting back into Riccardo Patresi's car and setting third fastest time.
What was interesting about Michael Schumacher was that when he did get into Patresi's car, as we thought it had Patresi setting on it, and in fact he went very, very quickly indeed. He went over a second quicker than Senna. And remember now that McLaren have got parity on engines with the Benetton team. But that, for me, was, I think, the outstanding performance on an afternoon when there were so many great performances. I think it's really unfair to single one person out because Johnny Herbert was a star, Derek Warwick was a star, Mark Blundell and Martin Brundle. Damon Hill, I mean, on pole position until that literally last 30 seconds, the last lap of qualification. And to be told by your car to pitch radio, you've got pole position for the British Grand Prix, and 30 seconds later to say, sorry Damon, Alan Prost's gone quicker. Ines, have you ever been in a situation like that?
No, I don't think so. I've never been that lucky. But what I was thinking, you know, when you say Schumacher considered his shunt yesterday to be a minor one, I'd hate to see him having a major one.
Well, Ines, to be honest, it was a major accident, but in fact, as we said yesterday on our qualifying broadcast, the level of safety around a Grand Prix circuit now is of such a level that it is possible to go off the circuit. And he left the circuit in a corner where you enter at about 160 miles an hour. At this particular point here, this is Copse Corner. And by the time he hit the tire barrier in front of the barrier itself properly, he still was probably doing 100 miles an hour. Now, years ago, I mean, and let's go back to the time when you were a Grand Prix driver, an accident of that magnitude might have been the last one you had.
Yes, that's very true. I mean, the cars that I drove certainly didn't have any of the structural strength that these cars have today. I mean, one of the problems is, of course, the cars have become so strong that they're, you know, good things to have accidents in, and I think you must admit there are far more accidents nowadays than there ever used to be. And, you know, people just, well, it's a good thing, of course, but they just get up and walk away from it. And so they know that if they are going to have a shunt, you know, they will just walk away from it. And you know, nobody wants to see anybody getting hurt. But I think one of the things is that it has reduced the standards of driving.
Well, Alan McNish, you are a young driver who has come into motor racing, Formula 3, Formula 3000, and test driver for this team we're actually currently in car with. Do you approach motor racing with the thought that it's almost a case of where a driver today is bulletproof because of the circuit safety and the car security? Do you bear that in mind, or are you still very aware that this is a dangerous sport to be involved in?
I think you've always got to bear it in mind. The cars and the circuits are far safer. Well, Mr. Zanardi and Mr. Schumacher, I think, tried to prove us wrong there. But the cars and the circuits are far safer than what they've ever been before, and this will keep on developing. However, saying that, you've got to respect dangers because it is a dangerous sport.
There is, of course, the other side of it. You don't nowadays have somebody like Colin Chapman standing over you telling you how much the damage has just cost.
I'm very lucky that we don't have to actually pay the bills.
Well, Alan, you've got a Scotsman as your team boss, Tom Walkinshaw. Is it true what they say about the Scots, that they're tight and mean with their money, or is Tom the exception to that rule?
Oh, Scotsmen are never tight and mean with their money. We always buy the drinks down the pub.
Well, at pence of Damon Hill in the Williams garage, and he is second quickest to his teammate Alan Prost, and there's only 0.2 of a second between them this morning, and that certainly is boding for a very, very interesting and exciting British Grand Prix here in 4 hours' time.
The end of the warm-up here at Silverstone. Williams 1-2 as expected, then Michael Schumacher in third, that's expected. Warwick in fourth, very, very good performance. Eric Comas in fifth, in sixth position Riccardo Patrese, Johnny Herbert in seventh, so Johnny again the third Brit, but now behind Derek Warwick. Gerhard Berger in eighth, Aguri Suzuki in ninth, and I'm all saying this, but there's actually still cars crossing the finish line, and Eric Comas elevates himself up to fourth position, just in front of Derek Warwick now. But where were we? 9th Suzuki, 10th Andretti, 11th Wendlinger, 12th Pierluigi Martini, that's a good performance. Brundle and Blundell 13th and 14th, Katayama 15th, 16th Barrichello. And if you wonder what has happened to Ayrton Senna, he's in 17th position.
Well, that's a big, big surprise, and this is Senna on his way back to the pits. He is not on a flying lap, but he will use that slowing down lap to still test the problems he has with his car. And Ayrton Senna, I'm sure, will be very unhappy indeed with his morning's work, to be so far down and to be going into a Grand Prix so crucial here as the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, because with the situation in the championship, with Alan Prost increasing the lead,
12 points is the difference.
Yes, and really here at Silverstone, the McLaren has not shown the kind of form, in spite of the team now having 7 Series Ford HB engines, that the team would have expected or possibly been hoping for.
Well, this man's on the up. Johnny Herbert being pushed back into his pit garage, into the Castrol Lola garage, and there's Alain Prost, championship leader, and a man who starts from his 28th pole position here this afternoon. The race will start at 2 o'clock local time, which is 3 o'clock on the continent, and of course half an hour before, that means 2:30 in the UK, 1:30 in the UK, 2:30 on the continent, we will be on the starting grid, and we will do interviews with all the people that like to talk to us, and we like to talk to, John.
Indeed, and of course there'll be a very busy grid indeed at Silverstone. So Allard, I wish you the best on that grid. There'll be hundreds of people milling around, and of course the grandstands facing the pits will be equally intrigued to see what's taking place just before the Grand Prix starts.
Before we go off air, Alan, a top 3 for this afternoon?
Well, I think the top 3 is probably going to end up in a different order maybe, but Prost, Hill and Schumacher. That's my prediction.
Just read that off screen.
Well, I'd like to see it Hill and Prost. I think Schumacher might get over enthusiastic, and it would be lovely to see Derek Warwick get up there for a change.
Well, so 2 different views here. I think, John, we shouldn't say anything, should we?
Well, I think the outcome of the Grand Prix will be largely determined by who's first into Copse at the beginning of the first lap, and once that situation has settled down, but which one it'll be, Alain Prost or Damon Hill, certainly both have made very good starts, but Damon in particular has been the man who's been quickest out of the blocks of the 2 Williams drivers so far this season. And if Damon can get first into Copse, well, we'll have a real motor race on our hands this afternoon.
Well, it's going to be an exciting race, hopefully, here at Silverstone, and you can watch it live here on Eurosport. Thank you from all of us in the commentary booth for watching the morning warm-up, and we'll see you in about 3.5 hours' time. Bye for now.
World Championship was brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. In association with Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.